Welcome back to Horrors Worldwide. Today I'm going to explain an American science fiction horror film called The Invisible Man, released in 2020. Spoilers ahead! Watch out and stay safe. The movie opens at nighttime with Cecilia Kass escaping from her wealthy boyfriend, Adrian, who is an optics scientist. She gets out of bed slowly and cautiously, and we see her mixing Diazepam, an anesthetic drug, into his drinking water. Then she collects a bag she has hidden away, stashes away the Diazepam, and goes to the basement, where Adrian has his lab. There, she disables all the security cameras except the one in the bedroom, and turns off the alarm system of the house. Then she goes to escape out of the garage, but when her dog follows her, she feels bad for him and tries to take off his collar so he can run away as well. In doing so, the dog accidentally hits a car standing in the garage, activating its car alarm and waking up Adrian. Furious, he tries to capture Cecilia again, but she escapes. During this, she accidentally drops the bottle of Diazepam, which he picks up. 2 weeks later, we see Cecilia hiding at her best friend James' house, who lives with his teenage daughter Sydney. Cecilia's sister, Emily, comes to visit her. Cecilia freaks out, saying she might be discovered as Adrian might have followed Emily to Sydney's house. Emily then tells her that Adrian has committed suicide. Adrian's brother Tom has willed all of Adrian's property and money to Cecilia. Cecilia is initially reluctant to accept it, but then she does so she can pay Sydney's college tutoring fee and help contribute to James's household expenses. However, Cecilia starts getting paranoid, feeling like she's being watched. At night, when she's sleeping beside Sydney, the blankets move off her slowly, and when she wakes up and tries to pull them back on, they don't move. She freaks out, which wakes up both Sydney and James. A few days later, Cecilia goes for an interview at an architectural firm, but when she opens her portfolio, it's completely empty, which startles her. Walking out of the interview, she faints and is rushed to the hospital. Once she's recovered and home, she gets a call from her attending doctor, who reports that her blood work shows enough diazepam in her system that it constitutes a mild overdose, and that is what caused her to faint. After hanging up, Cecilia finds the bottle of diazepam, which she had used to drug Adrian. She and James go to visit Tom, where Cecilia tells him she thinks that James used his expertise of fiber optics to make himself invisible, but Tom denies it. Back at James' house, she starts to feel unsafe and goes to visit Emily, but Emily is angry and upset with Cecilia because of a hateful email that Cecilia had sent her. Cecilia has an emotional breakdown when she opens her email account and finds the sent email because she didn't send it. Sydney finds her in this state and tries to calm her down, but she is suddenly punched violently from the side and falls over. She is convinced that Cecilia is the one who attacked her and screams for her father, telling him she doesn't want to stay in the house. Cecilia tries to tell them that it was Adrian, but he doesn't believe her. James rushes Sydney to a safe place. Meanwhile, Cecilia looks around the house, trying to confirm her suspicions of an unseen force, calling out that Adrian should hit her rather than a little girl. She talks to thin air, hoping to draw Adrian out. Exploring the house for signs of him, she finds her portfolio in the attic, along with a large knife and pictures of her taken while she was sleeping. She also finds Adrian's phone, which gets a text saying, "Surprise." Cecilia senses that she's not alone, and throws a can of paint down the attic ladder, which outlines the shape of a man. He runs and tries to wash it off. Meanwhile, Cecilia escapes in a lift car she has called and directs him to Adrian's house. There, she goes into his laboratory and after looking around, discovers an invisible suit. She hides this so she can prove her theory that Adrian had been stalking her. However, before she can leave, she is attacked by the Invisible Man. She manages to escape after the dog comes and attacks the Invisible Man. Cecilia calls Emily to a restaurant and apologizes for the email and says she loves her. Emily's hostility slowly melts, and Cecilia tells her she's found something to prove that she's been stalked. It is a suit that Adrian has built that makes the wearer invisible. Suddenly, a large knife springs up out of nowhere and slashes across Emily's neck, killing her, and then is forced into Cecilia's hand, who is too shocked to react. A woman at the next table notices and starts hysterically screaming. Cecilia is arrested and moved to an institute for the mentally ill. There, she finds out she's pregnant with Adrian's baby and starts giving up on her sanity. But soon, Tom visits her and tells her that the invisible suit does exist and that he helped Adrian make it. He tells her that she and the baby must return to Adrian, otherwise she will lose her newly acquired fortune and be committed to the institute for life. He also tells her that Adrian tampered with her birth control so she would get pregnant. Cecilia refuses, and before Tom leaves, manages to steal one of his pens. Cecilia prepares to slash her wrist with a stolen pen, but Adrian, who had been hiding in the room all along, stops her. It turns out that Cecilia suspected this and was using herself to bait him. She stabs him twice in the chest, which damages the suit, and he starts appearing and disappearing. A guard runs in to stop Cecilia from committing suicide, but he is stunned by seeing the appearing and disappearing figure. The Invisible Man easily beats him down and runs out where there are more guards. He takes down all of them one by attacking them as he is invisible and rushes out into the rain. Cecilia runs out into the rain after him with a gun to stop him, but he pins her down and tells her that he's going after Sydney as revenge since he doesn't want to hurt her and the unborn child. Cecilia calls James to warn him that Sydney is in danger. James rushes home to see his daughter being attacked by an invisible force. He tries to rescue her and is himself badly beaten up. Cecilia forces her way into the house and sprays the invisible attacker with a fire extinguisher so that the foam outlines his figure, and then she shoots him with a stolen police pistol. The Invisible Man collapses to the ground and dies. Cecilia and James pull off the mask and discover that it's Tom. A SWAT team searches Adrian's house to find him tied and walled up. James explains that Tom had been using Adrian to attack Cecilia, and the police conclude that Tom must have murdered Emily, but Cecilia is not convinced and is still determined to prove that Tom and Adrian were working together. She is also convinced that Adrian had been setting up his brother all along to take the fall for his crimes. Cecilia devises a plan with James to catch Adrian. She agrees to meet Adrian for dinner and wears a listening device, hoping that he will say something to implicate himself in the recent series of crimes. James, meanwhile, is waiting outside the property. At first, in answer to Cecilia's questions, Adrian denies that he was stalking her. She says she will mend the relationship if he confesses that he killed Emily, but Adrian denies it. But eventually, he agrees that he was terrorizing Cecilia. Cecilia figures this out when he uses the word surprise in the conversation, the same word that had been texted to Adrian's phone at the start of the movie. Cecilia excuses herself, saying she has to go to the bathroom. Adrian suddenly realizes that something is wrong, but before he can act on his instinct, his head is jerked back and his throat is cut. All this is viewed through a security camera. He falls to the ground, bleeding like crazy. Cecilia enters the room and is horrified at the scene. She calls the police and, in a panicky voice, tells them that she has walked in on an apparent suicide. After hanging up, she taunts Adrian, saying that she had used the spare invisible suit to kill him. James runs into the house to see Cecilia escaping with the invisible suit and her dog. He realizes that Cecilia had set up this meeting with the plan of killing Adrian. He still lets her go, and she disappears into the night.